wisdom and quotes from the internet and stuff that you see online is wonderful, but the practical implementation of it is really lacking. So we've got all these people sharing wisdom and information, but how much of it is getting through? The important lesson from this is that if you are not implementing what you've learned and what you've heard in your daily practice, and you're not actively participating in the world, then you have a belief that you've actually gained this wisdom because you heard it from someone else, but you've gained nothing from it. I think that's a really important lesson in anything. There's so much quotations, there's so much wisdom, and none of it is rubbish. All of it is useful, but how much is that changing you? These stories that I've been reading about from the Zen Masters, they read one story or they hear something that happened and they become enlightened, which means that it had such a profound impact on them. And what we have today is an overconsumption, as it is with food, as it is with music, as it is with YouTube, as it is with LinkedIn, overconsumption. So there's not much getting through. So my opinion is that I avoid these catchy quotes and I allow things to sit within me. And that way we don't become dependent on social media to give us these false illusion that we're becoming wise people, because we're not. In that way, you don't gain knowledge and wisdom from simply hearing what other people have said, but that you implement it in your life. And what I love about the Zen stories is that they're not telling you, hey, smile more and your life will be great. They're saying these very peculiar things that don't even make sense. And from that, you're supposed to gain some insight and some wisdom that makes you reflect, because it's not clear. It's not clear at all. The questions, the stories, they make you think and make you wonder. So as an example, let's begin with the first story. So here's a story. When Banzan was a man, it doesn't really matter who he was walking through a market. He overheard a conversation between a butcher and his customer. "Give me the best piece of meat you have," said the customer. "Everything in my shop is the best," replied the butcher. "You cannot find here any piece of meat that is not the best." At these words, Banzan became enlightened. So here we can see, as a third party, him walking by, listening to a story, or listening to a shopkeeper talking to a customer, became enlightened. What does that enlightenment mean? It means that something got through. When you're hearing a conversation and something in you resonates, you could say it feels like God speaking to you, or like the universe speaking to you. It's an eternal truth that resonates deeply within you. So if you're not getting that from the quotes that you read and from the information that you read in books, then you're really missing the point. So what the traditional meditators did is they sat with a poem. They would sit with this poem for days on end. And if you look at the stories, the biblical stories, the prophetic stories, they would sit with these stories. In the old days, before we had mass media, you'd have to go and find an elder and sit in his company or her company, and they would narrate a story to you that would have such a profound impact on you that it would shape your existence throughout history. So how many of those stories do you remember from movies, from books that you've read? For instance, The Alchemist is one that comes to mind. And another movie that comes to mind that I watch called Apocalypto. And there was a scene in the movie, and this, while I'm telling you about the scene in the movie, can remind you about scenes in movies that you've seen or stories that you've read in books. But if you really think about it, was it a catchy phrase that you read on social media that you know, a quote from this or a quote from that? How did that transform you? But when you see a story played out in a movie or in a book that you've read, or more importantly, through direct transmission, where you heard someone tell you a story of a death, of a sickness, of, like I was sitting with, I consult with a man who's a healer, and I sit in on his healing sessions, and a man and a woman walked in and said, I said, "What's going on here?" And he said, "This woman's just lost. They just lost their daughter to cancer." And I could see the energy in the room and this heaviness, and looking at the sadness in the eyes of the husband, the father of this daughter. and the daughter had a terrible marriage, and the daughter died of breast cancer. And so I said, I'm just going to sit here and observe, because that's what I usually do. I use that time to be in the company of people going through suffering and pain, for me to witness that as a silent observer, for me to feel what they're feeling without me trying to offer my opinion. And so the healer turned to me and said, tell them something, give them some of your wisdom and share with them. And I started asking some questions, and it was really difficult to see them suffering through what they were going through. And they were saying how terrible her marriage was, and how the husband is just such an awful human being, and that's still going on for child custody, even though the daughter's passed away. And I said, she's passed away, but you guys are still suffering. She had such a tough life, and she's finally gone, and you guys are carrying on this suffering. Do you think it's what she wants from you guys? And they said, absolutely not. And there was something that happened through the healing session, through my words and through what the healer did. And 30 minutes into it, after talking, they went out and they came back in, and an entirely different energy came over them. There was a lightness about them, and the woman said to me, you're so right, because we've been living like victims. We've been living like someone owes us something, and it's time for us to take responsibility for our lives. It was so touching to hear this, and I didn't in any way suggest during their suffering, so through such a tremendously difficult event, that they were being victims, but I said, you're carrying on suffering. And the common trait that I see now these days is that everybody feels like a victim. Everybody feels like someone owes them something. And I get it. People are taken advantage of on a daily basis. And we feel that we need to put things right. But in the process, as we're fighting for our justice, how does that make us feel? The Buddha said, when you hold the coal of anger in your hand, who gets burnt? You do. So when you hold on to something that you could have let go of, first of all, your body takes a huge toll on it, which then leads to tremendous suffering and illness. And secondly, it doesn't cause the change, because you feel like the world owes you something, and it may, but you taking on that energy is extremely suffocating, and it doesn't liberate you in any way. So there was a very important lesson that I gained from that, and to see the lightness on this woman's face through the healing as well. And I was just talking to the healer, saying how the work that I do on the emotional front and on the feelings front and the analytical side is one thing, but so many things reside in our bodies. So many things reside as emotions that are stuck within us, that have come from childhood, that have come from previous traumas, that display and come out, and you see this. And so if you found that story useful, I'm glad. The other thing that I was reflecting on is a science that's not a science in the conventional sense, but the art of seeing through people. You see, there was a perfect science, and I experienced this in Japan, in Morocco, in places like the Sahara, where people could see what you were like from a 5-minute encounter with you. They could tell you so much about yourselves. And this is something I studied with some of these masters, where you can spend time with someone, and I'm not talking about living with them, but you can tell their natures. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, because a lot of people say, oh, look, he's a bad guy. That's not what I'm talking about at all. You can read so much, but because people are not present, they can't see it. And so many times I'm called into a session, or a client says to me, Rishad, sit here and just observe. And then because I learned to tune in, because I couldn't do that before, about becoming so present, about becoming so observant, and that's what you learn as a coach, you start seeing things. And I said to this lady, I said, tell me, your pain is in the lower back. And she says, yes. How did you know that? But it's quite obvious when you're tuned in to what is going on here, into the body, because I've been through that myself. So what's happening these days is that we don't have any attention, because we just did a podcast now about how attention is the new marketable commodity. Every social media platform and every media platform is fighting for your attention. And every one of them is saying, watch this, it's going to help you, it's going to change your life. Join this, join that. And all it's doing is distracting you from looking within. So the whole coaching journey and everything that I've been teaching, not just you guys, but everybody else, I'm not teaching, I'm only sharing my wisdom that I've gained from myself, is that learn to listen inwardly. Your body gives you signs, and if you ignore them, the signs get louder and louder. So learn to listen to your body, listen to your intuition. That's why it's called intuition. It's in you, this tuition. Tuition means to learn. You have the learning inside of you, but we keep on looking outside. The same thing with intelligence. Why does the word intuition and intelligence start with in? Because that wisdom is within you. But we keep on looking for other people to tell us what to do. And one social media post and one YouTube video better than the other telling us what to do. But who's looking within and saying, but what do I want? And what do I need? And this resonated so much with this couple that came in. And they left there smiling. Because for the first time, nobody was saying, poor thing, look what happened to you. I also had this, and start sharing all our dramas, because that's what we do, right? We sit around and we share sad stories of how we were robbed and how we were mistreated and how this happened to us. And all of them happened. Nobody's denying that, you weren't taken advantage of, as I've been. But that energy of feeling like a victim then suffocates you and makes everybody around you feel okay to feel entitled. And if you feel entitled, you don't feel empowered, because you can't feel empowered and then be complaining about other people. So that's a very important lesson that I learned about listening to your body, listening to your intuition, and learning that more information means more confusion. More information does not mean more knowledge. Because if you can remember, in the old days, you'll hear people saying, they don't say this anymore. In traditional places, you'll see they'll say, my grandfather sat me down and he said to me, son or daughter, and that stayed with us for a long time. Or you meet someone, and I've had those profound encounters. And it's the transmission of the knowledge that is more important than the knowledge, because it's who is saying it. And I'm not talking about whether it's Tony Robbins or Eckhart Tolle or whoever it is. What has been transmitted to you from someone into your heart. It's that direct transmission where it changes something within you. And so for me, that's why that's why my whole thing is about ancient wisdom and eternal wisdom, is about getting back to small messages that make a profound shift within you. If the message does not cause you to become disturbed inside and question yourself, then that's not going to cause change, because change is difficult. So what we think we're doing by reading many books, which are fine, I'm not knocking books in any way, but we're not making profound shifts. And if you really think about it, the things that have made the most profound shift in your life have been as a result of pain, as a result of heartache, as a result of loss. Those have given you your biggest lessons, and they have made profound shifts in you. Some of them not good, because you've learned to fear the world, or you fear people, or you fear growth. But it was never a happy moment. It was never, oh, I was scrolling on Instagram and I saw this post and it changed my life. No, it didn't. It didn't. So through pain and through loss and through suffering is growth. So what we have to do is go against our biological wiring and move towards those things that we fear, instead of seeking the comfort zone, which is the death zone. Because what we fear to take on is what we're hiding from, and the only time is now. So I will continue with a couple of other sayings, but if anybody wants to say something or add anything, please feel free. So, this example of the story that I mentioned with Banzan walking through the market, and he says, everything in my shop is the best. You cannot find any piece of meat here that is not the best. What does he mean by that? And why would that cause someone to become enlightened? We go through life looking for better experiences. You know, this person's better, that job is better, this partner is better. But look what this man is saying. He says, every piece of meat in the shop is the best. So, which means that it's your mind that creates this perception of lack, of it's not good enough. I need this and I need that. And today I was sitting with a businessman, and he said, oh, I will only be able to do that once I get this. And I said, if you can't do this with what you have right now, you're not going to be able to do it what you're going to get in the future, because you're deluding yourself. Everybody's waiting for that one thing to happen before they can make that change, before they can take that big step. But it doesn't work like that in my experience. Maybe you do. Maybe you can sit around waiting for that final amount to come in, or that love of your life to walk through the door, or some profound thing to happen. It doesn't. If you can't say that everything that I have right now is exactly what I need, then you're missing the point, because you're not looking right under your nose. And the Sufis say that the signs of God are right in front of you. And where you can use the word God as a placeholder for saying the universe is giving you exactly what you need right at this moment. And if you can't see that, then your eyes need work, not the environment. And that's why I said to my client, and I still remember it, he said, I need a change of scenery. I said, no, you don't need a change of scenery. You need a new pair of eyes. Because the eyes with which you're looking at right now is seeing problems. You're not seeing the solution to what you need to do. So that's what we first have to realize, is that in the story of Banzan, why he became enlightened, because he realized that perfection can only happen if his mind allows it to. So where you are right now is not perfect according to your mind, but it's exactly where you were meant to be for you to achieve what you're meant to achieve. And what you're meant to achieve is not what your neighbor achieved or what your colleague achieved, is what resides within your soul. And if you're not asking that question about what my soul yearns for and what I ultimately want to achieve in my life, then you're kicking the can down the road. And your soul will get louder and say, enough is enough. I need you to listen to me. And that's when the body starts giving you signs, when the relationship collapses, or when something happens with your work. Those are signs for your growth. So people say, why did that happen? Why does this keep on happening? It's because you're not listening. And if you listen, your soul is guiding you, saying, stop wasting time living somebody else's dream when you're supposed to be living your dreams and your ambitions. So I think that's a very important lesson for me, and if it can benefit you, great. But it's no way am I saying that I know what's better for you. I'm only sharing my young years of wisdom, and I'm sure there's people that have a lot more wisdom than I out there, and I continuously be a learner in that terms. So this is Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh was an amazing Buddhist monk who was from Vietnam, who was exiled and faced a very difficult upbringing in his life. But in this process, he became one of the most foremost on finding calm within, and wrote so many books and changed the lives of so many people by teaching them just to allow life to flow through you. And he says to think in terms of either pessimism or optimism oversimplifies the truth. The problem is to see reality as it is. Not to be positive, not to say, oh, let's turn this into a positive thing, or oh, nothing's ever going to work out right. No, it's to see the moment for what it is. So the first step to any change is acceptance. People don't realize the power of acceptance. They think it's some kind of waving white flag and me giving up. No, you cannot fight a battle until you accept where you're at. If you're in the third round of a boxing match, if any of you everybody's seen or witnessed a boxing match, the boxer has to say, I'm down 3 rounds. That's acceptance. Say, what am I going to do? And that's when you decide what you're going to do in the moment. But if you don't accept it, what most people is delude themselves and say, no, I can't accept the way things are. The way things are is the way things are. So if you can start with the way things are and say, okay, what do I want to do about them, right? So there's only 2 things you can do when you're confronted with the situation. You can either change it or you can accept it. Because if you can't change it, you have to accept it. Because what most people do is the third option. they suffer and they complain and they nag. And what does that do? It makes the ego feel great, but it destroys the energy because every morning becomes a dread, every moment becomes a dread instead of something that inspires you. So the energy of feeling like life owes you a favor, which it may do, is a terrible energy to use because what you want to do is vibrating at a high energy. You don't want to be vibrating at low energy saying the world owes me something. So the Zen proverb, I think, is very appropriate here. Only when you can be extremely pliable and soft can you be extremely hard and strong. This is very important. What most people don't understand is that they want to be tough exteriors, but inside they're weak because they lack the acceptance of saying, this is where I am. I'm weak. So I was with a group of business people trying to do a new entrepreneurship thing, and I said, the first thing you have to acknowledge is your weaknesses, not your strengths. Everybody writes down the SWOT analysis, right? Which is very useful. But I say, start off with your weaknesses and then realize where you need other people to fill those gaps. What we like to do in the West is talk about how great we are. And I'm sure we are great in many ways. There's no taking away from that. But if we had to realize our weaknesses, because we're human beings and we have weaknesses, then we can go look for that strength in other people. I know I'm not a great salesperson, but I do very good at coaching. So I can't be going out there selling all the time. That's my weakness. I can't do accounting. I'm terrible at numbers. But I know these things about myself. But if you look at every post online, everybody's bragging about all the things they're great at, right? How many posts do you see and say, hire me? I'm terrible at this, this, and this, but I can do this, this, and this. Look at any profile. Because people don't want to be realistic. Because you can't be honest. You can't talk about your weaknesses. You just got to talk about your strength. But that implies that you have no weaknesses, which is an absolute lie, right? But if you know your weaknesses and say, look, I have a problem with this, I have a problem with that, but what I can do is this and this. But you see, HR companies and hiring managers being realistic as well. I read this wonderful thing and they said the hiring process is two lying people. One is the recruitment manager and the other one is the employee. They're both lying out of their teeth. The one is saying this is what I want and the other one is saying this is what I can do. But both of them are killing themselves because the employer is under the delusion that he's going to get or she's going to get a perfect match for this job specification. And the employee thinks that they're fitting in a job specification. You know what it's like if you've done online dating before, until you meet the person and you have a meal with them. It's totally different. So again, establishing your weaknesses and knowing your pliability and your softness, then you can be strong. And this is from the martial arts that you learn. If you visit any martial arts center in traditional places, even in the West, you see these people that come out of, jiu-jitsu or kung fu or judo. There's a lot of humility about them. They almost seem meek. They don't come across as these brute, arrogant people that walk out of another type of Western-orientated gym, because the first thing you learn is humility. Because humility keeps you strong. And pride and arrogance and I know better is precisely what they teach a lot in the West. And they call that self-confidence. But I think self-confidence is self-knowledge and self-knowing about your limitations. And that's not weakness. Because if a man knows his own weaknesses, he is unstoppable. Because a man who doesn't know, or woman, they are open to being kicked in all the wrong places where they're weak because they don't know themselves. So the self-confidence is, as far as I'm concerned, is knowing your weaknesses. Because your strengths, it's very evident. But your weaknesses is your blind spots. And most of the time, you don't know your own weaknesses because you have a blind spot to that. And that's where a loving person in your life and a true friend who is allowed to be honest, you can say, you know what? You're great at that, but you're terrible at that. And you can't take offense at that. You say, that's what you do. You are pliable and you say, thank you for that insight. And me as a coach, that's my job. And all the coaches online can relate to that as well. Is that we show people the blind spots. That's what they pay us for. To say, but you know what? You can't do that. And I have a coach as well. He said, Rishad, You can't do that. That's why you're not going to be able to do that, because it goes against your nature. And sometimes we kid ourselves and we joke with ourselves thinking, I can do this, but I can't. I'm not made for that. So knowing yourself doesn't happen only by yourself. It happens through introspection from genuine people, not from YouTube channels, which is great for one thing as well. I find it very good for entertainment, but people are now turning to online sources for deep understanding within themselves. And for me, it's always passed down from heart to heart. And I believe this is vital. And of course, you may disagree with me and say, I had the most profound lessons from a YouTube channel. Great. If it's helped you, that's good. It hasn't really helped me. And I believe we are human beings for a reason, is to assist each other. But there has to be radical honesty and radical allowance. If the communications lines are blurred and people lead with ego, wanting to hurt someone, then of course this conversation can't even happen, because you're just trying to bring the other person down. And that's why radical honesty requires radical compassion and aligning on the same page as well. So, in line with this, there's a very simple Zen proverb that just a few words. It says, let go or be dragged. Now, what does that mean? Let go or be dragged. This is precisely the theme that we've been speaking about now. When we hold on to things and we insist on things being the way that we want it to do before we act, or insisting people or situations change for our liking, we're just getting dragged along because we're not prepared to let go. And the ego and the mind loves to hang on and to insist that things need to be this way, that life owes them something, and this is how things should be. It can't be this way. And that's what we fight, instead of accepting the moment. So what we're doing in the process, without realizing it, is allowing us to be dragged by life. So we're not living life. We are being dragged through the streets because you're not letting it go. It's very important to understand. So I will start winding up now by something that Eckhart Tolle shares. He says, all true artists, whether they know it or not, create from a place of no mind, from inner stillness. If any of you practice meditation, which means nothing more than sitting and just watching and observing yourself, something that's a rare luxury these days. How many of us here have the time to sit, be quiet, and watch the chatter in our minds? Has anyone observed how much goes through your mind dictating how you should be and how you should feel? So, what is the chatter of your mind? If you listen carefully to your thoughts, we will have a whole discussion about this because it's quite a topic that I've explored in tremendous detail. But it's in the act of witnessing. It's just witnessing, just observing your thoughts and your feelings, that you gain such knowledge of the bullshit that runs through you, and the stuff you should be ignoring and the stuff that you should be taking seriously. But most of us have a tape playing in our heads that started out from youth, and it's not even our baggage, and we're playing the same tape. Why can't I be this? Why can't I do this? Why isn't she like that? Why isn't he like that? Why isn't life like that? And that same tape just keeps on playing, and you never look at it. So Eckhart Tolle says, from a place of no mind, from inner stillness. How many of us experienced inner stillness? It took me all my life to experience stillness. There is so much to be gained from sitting and observing. I didn't know the power of observing, and if you're interested on my future segments, I will show you the art of witnessing. There's nothing complex. What people seem to believe is meditation, and that's why people are put off with it. They think that you're supposed to change into some funny garments and go sit at the top of a mountain and sing certain songs and still your mind and have no thoughts. It's nothing to do with that. It's just you have to turn off the devices. You can even keep some music on, it's okay, in the background. But just observe the chatter in your mind. And when you start observing your chatter in your mind, you can understand so much about other people and the chatter in their minds. I can predict what someone's going to say before they say it, and I'm not saying I'm some kind of wise person, but I'm like, I've seen the chatter in my mind and I can see what's going to come out of your mind. And I observe and I'm like, so predictable. So there's this thing called a shared consciousness. You see, when all of us are feeling this restriction in, say, for instance, money or health or whatever it is, you pick up that frequency. And if you listen to your chatter, you don't even know why you're stressing about this and you're stressing about that, when in reality, it's not that bad. If you really think about it, what you stress about is really not that bad. And if you're honest with yourself, you'd say, you know what, it's not that bad. But why is that consuming me so much? Because if you're not listening to your thoughts, you're downloading somebody else's stuff. It's almost like radio frequencies, like your Wi-Fi. Everybody can pick that up. And I've witnessed this, and this is what Carl Jung spoke about as well, the shared consciousness. So the shared unconscious is this, you could sow this energetic field. So when everybody's feeling lack, you pick that up. When everyone feels like victims, you pick that up. And you don't even know why. You're like, that person owes me something. And why can't that person be like that? So if you're not realizing, hang on a second, why am I feeling like that? Why am I even entertaining that thought? It's not true. So because that's what happens if you don't sit and be still, then you're going to buy into somebody else's garbage and you're going to allow that to dictate how your day goes. And that's why waking up in the morning and priming your day and starting off on your own rhythm is so important. And myself included, sometimes waver on this, but then I become unconscious, which means that I'm unconscious of all the garbage that's going through my head and in my body. And to reset that on a daily basis is so necessary now, because the first thing we do right now, most of the time, is we turn our phones on and we're back in the past. We're living in the past because what we did yesterday, we're going to do today. And 80% of what you did yesterday is what you're going to do today. So nothing new is ever done. And you don't think, because remember, the way that you think and the way that you feel determines the outcome of your life. And if you're thinking and feeling the same way, that becomes your destiny. And that's what Carl Jung said. Until you don't make the unconscious conscious, you will call it fate. So you will say, that's why it happened. It was just meant to happen. No, it's because of your thinking and feeling the same specific way, you create the same destiny. And that destiny is not written by someone else, it's written by how you're engaging with life from moment to moment. So for a second, if you can, sit down and question and ask yourself, why am I thinking these thoughts? Why do I want these things? Why do I feel so lack in my life? And the energy of wholeness, of feeling full in life. When was the last time you felt like life was a celebration? Like, what a gift this is. So I wake up, I tell my clients to wake up and say, start off with this, with the following lines, and say, with a smile on your face, I am so lucky to have, and now fill in the blanks. So try that exercise and say, I am so lucky to have, and see what happens. That you have a perfect face. The perfect face means the perfect for you, not according to Instagram. That I have a perfect situation, however you define that as. That you can walk, and if you can't walk, then you can use your hands, however that is. It is perfect for you. But remember, 80% of our thoughts are negative. We have a negativity bias of 80%. So 80% of the thoughts in our mind are going to be drastic, worst case scenarios that are making us very fearful. So the point is not to start thinking 100 positive thoughts, because that's going to ruin your day, because you can't. It's a negative force that you're trying to paste over a positive force. Witness the garbage that runs through you and observe it. And you say, okay, well, that's what it is, but it's not mine. And that separates you from being the participant in the noises in your head to becoming the observer. And once you're the observer, you have so much power, because you're not the doer. As I say, you're not a human doing, you're a human being. And when you're being and you're witnessing, you can witness incredible things that are going on around you, inside of you, in your family, in your work environment. Have you looked at the ceiling where you work? Have you looked at the skies at night? Have you looked at those subtle things? It's the doorknob on your car, if you have a car. Have you looked at the back of your cell phone? We don't notice these subtle things. And that's the art of observation. So, excuse me for this turning into more of chatter than stories, but I felt it was needed in the moment. And I hope it benefited you. I did go over time a bit, and I can see a few people have stayed on, and I hope it benefited you. And if you give me some feedback, then I know what's useful, so that we can tailor it more. I have a lot more to share, but my whole point is that I'm not here to give you some more wisdom. I'm simply reflecting on what you should do to find your process and to find your inner compass, your intuition. And I'm huge about intuition. It's away from rational thinking. It's your inner guide. And that's what I really hope to promote and to teach and to influence everyone out there, to listen within, to listen to your body, to listen to your heart, to listen to your soul, and to listen to the voices in your head, to become a powerful observer, because then you're in control and you're in charge, and you can dictate how you engage in the world. So I trust you found that useful. I will finish off here. If anybody has any questions, I'll give it a minute for you to add a question, or any feedback you'd like to give. Feel free. You're very welcome. Thank you to all of you. I will be doing this one time in the week, and I will post that on LinkedIn, and then next week Sunday doing this same show again. I hope you have an incredible week. I just ask you to do one thing, is to observe your breath. Just observe your breath, because that's something that is happening all the time. And every time you observe your breath, allow the observation of your breath to deepen into awareness, and just watch inside your body, inside your mind, observe the chatter, and return to the stillness which is underlying all your feelings and all your thoughts. There is a silent observer in you. See if you can find that silent observer. It is magnificent once you find it. And if you live your life from the silent observer, life becomes an incredible observation rather than a participation. With that, I wish you good night or good afternoon or good morning wherever you are, and I'll see you on the next program. Take care.